The sun was setting over the crumbling town of Redemption, casting a orange-gray haze over the cracked sidewalks and peeling storefronts. In the midst of this decay, a lone figure emerged from the dusty horizon, his gait long and purposeful. He was a man of uncommon height, his face a topographic map of scars and creases, his eyes sunken like dry wells. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his features, giving him the aspect of a specter, a harbinger of doom. He wore a long, black duster, its hem flapping behind him like a dark cloud, and a wide leather belt cinched around his waist, adorned with a silver buckle in the shape of a coiled serpent. He moved through the deserted streets, his boots kicking up small whirlwinds of dust, as if he was a dark magnet, drawing the very life out of the town. Folk watched him from behind shuttered windows, their whispers and gasps carrying on the wind like leaves blown from a dying tree. He stopped in front of the local saloon, its sign creaking in the breeze, the words "Mama's Mercy" etched in faded letters. The doors swung open with a faint sigh, and he stepped inside, his presence drawing the attention of the patrons like a lodestone. The air inside Mama's Mercy was thick with smoke and desperation. Whiskey-soaked laughter and the clinking of glasses faltered as the stranger's gaze swept the room, his eyes lingering on each face like a cold wind. Behind the bar, Mama herself, a gruff battle-axe of a woman, polished a mug with a dirty rag, her eyes narrowing as she took in the stranger's imposing figure. The patrons, a ragtag assortment of ranchers, outlaws, and down-on-their-luck gamblers, seemed to shrink into themselves, their hands instinctively drifting to the butts of their guns. A lone piano player, a hoodoo man with eyes that gleamed like polished onyx, faltered in his playing, the notes dying on his lips as he sensed the stranger's aura. The stranger's gaze came to rest on a lone figure, a man with a face like a broken plate, his eyes sunken, his skin the color of old leather. He sat at a table near the back, a half-empty bottle of rockgut in front of him, his eyes fixed on the stranger with a mixture of fascination and terror. The stranger's boots creaked on the wooden floorboards as he moved towards the man, his duster flapping behind him like a dark wing. The patrons parted, their faces twisted with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, as the stranger loomed over the seated man, his voice low and husky, like the rustling of dry leaves. "You're the one they call Crippled Jack?" Crippled Jack's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route, before coming back to the stranger's face, his pupils constricting as if staring into the barrel of a gun. He nodded, a jerky, involuntary motion, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down like a trapped animal. The stranger's gaze never wavered, his eyes burning with an inner intensity that made the air seem to vibrate around him. "I've been looking for you, Jack," he said, his voice dripping with malice, each word dripping with venom. "You see, I've heard you have a talent for telling tales that can curdle milk at 100 paces. Crippled Jack's face twisted into a sneer, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. "What do you want, stranger?" he spat, his voice laced with defiance, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the door as if searching for an escape route. The stranger's smile was a thin, cruel thing, a mere flicker of the lips that sent shivers down the spines of the assembled patrons. "Oh, I want to hear a story, Jack. A story about the folded man. I've heard you know it better than anyone." His hand slipped into his duster, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath as he withdrew a small, ornate box, adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. "Let's just say, I'm willing to pay top dollar for the tale," the stranger purred, his eyes glinting with a hunger that made the hairs on the back of Crippled Jack's neck stand on end. Crippled Jack's eyes locked onto the box, his pupils dilating as if hypnotized by the strange symbols that danced across its surface. The room seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening as if the very presence of the box had sucked the light out of the air. The patrons of Mama's Mercy edged closer, their faces slack with morbid fascination, as Crippled Jack's gaze remained fixed on the box. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here, stranger. You shouldn't have asked for that story." The stranger's smile never wavered, his eyes glinting with an unholy light. "Oh, but I have. And now you're going to tell it to me, Jack. You're going to tell me about the folded man and what happened in that church all those years ago." Crippled Jack's face convulsed, his lips twisting into a snarl. "You don't know what you're asking for," he hissed, his voice like a rusty gate. "You don't know what you're unleashing." The stranger's hand closed around the box, his fingers seeming to stroke the ornate carvings as if they were alive. "I know exactly what I'm asking for, Jack, and I'm willing to pay the price. So, let's get started, shall we?" The room seemed to hold its breath, the patrons frozen in anticipation. As Crippled Jack's eyes rolled back in his head, his voice dropping to a haunted whisper. It was a night just like this, when the wind was blowing like a chorus of the damned, and the folded man came to redemption. Crippled Jack's voice dripped with a malevolent glee, his words weaving a spell of unease as he began to spin his tale. He came walking down Main Street, his long legs striding like a giraffe, his face a twisted mess of fingers and eyelids, all folded inward like a bloody origami. The patrons of Mama's Mercy leaned in, their faces aglow with a macabre fascination, as Crippled Jack's words painted a picture of horror. He had no eyes, just two black holes where they should have been, sucking in the light around him like a void. And his skin, oh Lord, his skin was like parchment, stretched tight over his bones, with lines and creases that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. The stranger's eyes never left Crippled Jack's face, his gaze drinking in every detail, as the words spilled out like a dark confession. He moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, like a puppet on a string, his long fingers flexing and curling like snakes. And his voice, oh God, his voice was like a rusty gate, scraping against the nerves, making your teeth ache and your skin crawl. The room was silent, the only sound Crippled Jack's hypnotic voice, weaving a spell of unease that seemed to draw the very air out of the room. He went to the old church on the hill, the one with the steeple that reached up to heaven like a bony finger. And when he went inside, the congregation was waiting, their faces hidden behind masks of paper and silk. The stranger's hand tightened around the box, his knuckles white with anticipation. As Crippled Jack's voice dropped to a whisper, the words barely audible over the pounding of the patrons' hearts. And then the folded man began to speak, his voice like a rusty pipe organ, playing a tune that curdled milk and soured blood. He spoke of the horrors that lurked beyond the veil, of the things that waited in the darkness. Of the things that waited in the darkness, their eyes glowing like embers, their fingers flexing like claws. Crippled Jack's voice whispered on, his words conjuring images of unspeakable terror. The patrons of Mama's Mercy were transfixed, their faces pale and sweaty, as Crippled Jack's tale seemed to draw them into a world of madness and despair. The air was thick with an unholy presence, as if the folded man himself was lurking just beyond the edge of perception, waiting to pounce. The stranger's eyes gleamed with an unholy light, his face twisted into a rictus of fascination, as Crippled Jack's words conjured visions of unholy rituals and unspeakable sacrifices. And then, the folded man unfolded himself, his body like a puzzle box, opening up to reveal the horrors within. Crippled Jack's voice whispered, the words dripping with malevolent glee. The room seemed to hold its breath, the patrons frozen in a mixture of horror and fascination, as Crippled Jack's tale reached its climax. And when the congregation looked upon the folded man's true form, they went mad, their minds shattered like brittle glass, their screams echoing through the night like the howling of wolves. As Crippled Jack's words faded away, the room was left in stunned silence, the patrons of Mama's Mercy staring at each other with a mixture of fear and awe. The stranger's eyes never left Crippled Jack's face, his gaze burning with an unholy intensity, as if he was searching for some hidden truth, some secret that only Crippled Jack knew.